Now, the Solidarity Fund, which was set up to raise and disburse funds in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, has announced that it's to wind down its operations by mid-December this year. Yesterday, the fund released its second annual financial statements for the period 1 March 2021 to our year end of the 28th of February 2022. Now, the fund says that its latest financial statements prove that the administration of funds has been done responsibly and adhering to the highest standards of accountability and transparency. Tandi Nzimande is the CEO of the Solidarity Fund, and she joins us now to talk more about this. Tandi, so good to have you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us. Good morning.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Let's go back a little bit, shall we? I mean, I'm going to bring up a time we don't necessarily want to remember, but that is unfortunately etched into history and something that we will never forget. But let's just talk about the origins once again of the Solidarity Fund.
So you're quite right. I think many of us have forgotten where we come from with COVID, where we didn't know what was happening. The world, across the world, there was panic. The president announced the lockdown. He announced the Solidarity Fund, and business and government and civil society and individuals crowded behind the Solidarity Fund as a South African response to this great unknown that we were facing. So the Solidarity Fund was started essentially as lockdown was hitting. And as such, we still don't have offices and such because we've always operated in the virtual space. It was quite an extraordinary response from South Africans, pulling out of their pockets the little that they had from the platform, across the platforms, the third-party platforms, as we call them, where you could donate R5, and South Africans did, and those who had more were able to donate the millions that they did, and in a particular case, the billion that they did. And it really was a remarkable response to the great threat of the pandemic. And it continues to be, I think, a great example of what South Africans can do when they put their minds to it.
It certainly is, and it really did assist in many ways, and we'll talk about that. But let's just talk about, so from its inception to date, how much funds were actually raised by the fund and then subsequently dispersed by the Solidarity Fund?
So to date, we have raised almost 4 billion and have dispersed, I would say 3.5 billion of that. At the end of February, we had dispersed 3.2. We have been continuing to disperse, so let's call it about 3.5.
Yeah, and I mean the kinds of projects that you donated to. I mean, I remember clearly the Solidarity Fund coming through to assist when it came to putting deposits down for vaccines, putting, helping out different hospitals. I mean, at one stage, there were people saying that if it wasn't for the Solidarity Fund, we actually wouldn't have gotten through this. And that, I mean, these are things that I've heard just from people talking offline. But try and give us a better understanding of the kind of projects and the things that the Solidarity Fund actually assisted in funding.
I think I am the second CEO at the Solidarity Fund. So my experience of the Solidarity Fund in the first instance was as just a regular citizen, and the information aspects, the aspects of making sure that people begin to have more reliable sources of information, I think was quite critical. The PPE that was brought into the country, focusing in particular on assisting the frontline healthcare workers, both in the formal sector and in the informal sector, in the sense of community healthcare workers. The support with respect to testing at the time, and getting test kits and assisting in those spaces, and assisting universities, certain universities which were generally underfunded universities, were also brought into the fold and capacitated to assist in the testing, and have gone on to actually assist with some of the research work that we've also funded. As you've mentioned, we've funded on the vaccination side. We've funded ventilators. Again, another, I think, proud moment for South Africa, where South African minds came together and produced a South African-made ventilator, which was then utilized by the Department of Health as part of the response. We have funded various equipment for the hospital system, touching quite a number of hospitals, several 100 hospitals in the country, across all the provinces. We have been involved with in fact, the response to the July 2022, July 2021 rather, unrest that happened, and we have provided also humanitarian assistance in by way of food. We supported the small businesses that were affected by the unrest, as well as the small vendors and employees of those small businesses that were not covered by the UIF. Turning to our humanitarian pillar, we have worked quite extensively on food and food security related programs. So there we took a two-pronged approach, or perhaps I should say three. One is food vouchers, issuing food vouchers, and also food hampers that were delivered to communities. The other was, we saw that spike in GBV, and GBV remains a very key and a key focus area for us, as the spike hasn't settled. So we had the spike from the immediate experience of COVID and the lockdown. However, the patterns haven't settled. So we are supporting the GBVF fund in some of the work that they do.
It's quite incredible to see, the different touch points that you've had, because obviously the intention of this the Solidarity Fund was purely COVID focused. I mean, that was a very unique fund, something we haven't seen before, and it's work. Obviously, you're talking us through the financials and where the money's gone. Interesting to see that the funds were also made available for those devastating times of the July unrest, and of course with the floods in KZN as well. The reality is that unfortunately we're going to see events like these happen again. I mean, I'm not saying, and we hope nothing like the July unrest, but certainly these kind of acts of God, of flooding and things like this, where people, in desperate situations and need to turn somewhere. And the reality is that a place like the Solidarity Fund is a place they could turn to. Now, wrapping up operations, obviously finishing this, is there anything in the pipeline to perhaps create something similar to this for the intention of what you are doing?
So, Leanne, the approach that the board has taken is that the Solidarity Fund will remain in what we call a low activity state. So it will be available for calamities that are more similar to in nature to COVID, I suppose, than they are to the acts of God that you refer to. So should something that is an unknown affect the whole country in the way that COVID did, the Solidarity Fund would then reactivate. The board at the time would reactivate and get going as quickly as possible to respond to that particular calamity. With respect to the more ongoing, the crises that we do experience from time to time, and which are more acts of God, as you say, the board has taken the view that the Solidarity Fund is not as well placed to be responding to the acts of God that are common, are more common occurrences. So looking really at the more calamitous type crisis like we had with COVID.
Yeah, and yeah, we hope those times don't come too soon. We really don't. But I mean, one could look at the Eskom situation and the emergency that we're facing there, with a lack of power and so many businesses that are losing funds. But this is not where you come in. But you know, this unique cooperation that we've been seeing, it's something, as I mentioned a bit earlier, but it's something that is really a blueprint to follow, which, as you say, can be reignited at any time. You don't necessarily find these things where we talk about solidarity between the business world, between your average citizen, government coming together and putting money together in a pool and using it for the desired results that it was intended to do, which, from what I'm hearing from you, has been a great success. I mean, I think it's just a great platform to show how partnerships can actually work, and that things can be done if they are administered individually away from perhaps government's hands and put into business and then used with the purpose that the money is raised for.
No, absolutely. I think it is a blueprint, and I do think it is something that we should be looking at as a model for solving greater problems in the country. It doesn't need to sit, of course, within the Solidarity Fund space per se. However, I think the model we could use to solve a number of problems that we face as a country, absolutely.
Just a little bit of explaining. While releasing the financial statements yesterday, you said that the only letdown is in relation to donations received that are dependent on collection by third-party agents, like crowdsourcing platforms. But perhaps you can explain this to us.
The auditors are actually better placed to explain how they view certain things. So the auditors have a specific concept, which is hard for most of us, I think, to grasp, me included, which is that one cannot say that third-party platforms, i.e. crowdsourcing platforms, actually passed through all the monies that were due to the Solidarity Fund. Now, third parties, they are absolutely reliant on their reputations for passing through all these amounts. So for us, it was anathema that we should experience, the auditors should take the stance that they did. However, it appears that that is what auditors generally do when you receive monies from third-party agents or third-party platforms, which really is just crowdsourcing platforms. And we all know that those platforms are created to pass through the monies and would not be able to be successful in their work should they retain any of those monies.
So just a final comment, where to for you now? Like you say, the second CEO of the fund is who you are, and obviously now the sort of getting the end of it now, wrapping up at the end of this month. Tandi, where do you go from here?
So the wrap-up is likely to take us to December. Okay. And there may be aspects that are just small neatening up that spill over into 2023. After that, I think I will take a very long rest. It's my first plan. And then we'll see from that time where we go, yes. Well,
listen, you deserve the rest, and just well done for a job that is, I suppose, like you say, something that it's a calling. It's something that we needed so desperately at the time, and I think doing what it was set up to achieve. So Tandi Nzimande, the CEO of the Solidarity Fund, releasing its latest financial statements and announcing that it's wrapping up what it was intended to do, and that was, of course, assist with COVID where it could. But now, as things have settled with regard to COVID, they will be wrapping up everything come December. All right. Thanks so much again, Tandi, for your time.